Hey, what's going on guys, Pansy here, and welcome to my latest BDO grind spot guide. In this video, we'll be going over a lot of useful information and the recommended grind spots through various AP brackets. Here's how we're going to organize this video. We're going to kick things off with some useful tools, then break down the grind spots based on key AP points. Then we're going to talk a little bit about Agris Grind spots, and finally, we're going to talk about what you can do for money if you don't have any loot scrolls and how to go about it. Now, as a disclaimer guys, while we are going over the various grind spots in this video, we're not going to talk about exactly how much money you should be making because there's so much variables involved. The individual player's skill, the class they play, the amount of buffs, the type of buffs you're using, the amount of drop rate you have. Your account progression is important, like getting the family fame for that drop rate, getting your ecology up. That's all going to play a factor into how much money per hour you make. And it's actually really useful to do this because this is a game you'll be grinding for many hours to get to the end game, like hundreds of hours. So 20% extra drop rate over hundreds of hours, that's huge. So because of all the variables, we're not going to talk about exactly how much money you should be making, but we will talk about how to use certain tools to find some approximate amounts to aim for. Before we get started, let me tell you about the sponsor of today's video. This video is brought to you by World Eternal Online. World Eternal Online is a top-down MOBA-style MMORPG where players can team up to fight bosses, enemy alliances, or even against each other in PvP. In this game, you unlock various heroes and level them up. Each hero has their own unique abilities and gear. World Eternal has a player-driven economy, an ever-changing world, and even features raid bosses and PvP sieges. In this game, each player belongs to a city where they harvest resources and craft items. You can upgrade your city to access new recipes and defenses. The crafting economy is the cornerstone of World Eternal Online. Players collect resources from killing monsters, gathering in the wild, and harvesting from their own city. These resources are used to craft equipment, potions, and even pets for your heroes. World Eternal Online received investments from A16Z, who also invested in the likes of Facebook, Instagram, and Roblox. World Eternal is a free-to-play non-pay-to-win game. Join the open alpha and play the game for yourself with the links in the description down below. More content coming soon. Alright guys, let's get started with the video. We're going to kick things off by talking about tools. So there are various tools you can use to help optimize your grinding and help you figure out where you should grind. So the first one I want to point out is obviously what we have in the game itself. We're going to just go to the old menu here and click on item drop. This will open up the monster zone info and you can find all sorts of information. This is so useful. As you see, we have Aquaman over here. It shows you the equipment that drops, all the other drops. It'll show you all the various titles you can get from here. Farming titles is a good account progression goal. And you can pick a lot of spots here and just see what they have to offer. And this is really useful because they do have some hashtags here to divide into different sections and stuff. Some of them are may not be the best inputs, but hey, you know, it's definitely a good place to start. Now let's move on to Garmot.com. It has some of the best tools we have available. Now we all know about Garmot's gear planner, grind tracker and stuff, but there's a few other things I want to point out. First, let's start off with the grind tracker. So you can keep track of your grinding, but as well as check out the global stats and stuff. But recently, I started using this recommended spots, which I found pretty useful because you can filter out various inputs here and help you narrow down where you could be grinding. So you can adjust your AP and DP over here, and it'll filter out the spots accordingly. You can organize it based on if you're going for Caphras and Spirit Dust and stuff. And this is really useful when the Caphra market is kind of slow. But yeah, this is a really useful tool. You can definitely figure out some grind spots here, and it's a good starting point. Additionally, you also want to keep note of a few other things. One is going to be the brackets. You want to keep note of your AP bracket and make sure you're hitting those next brackets because the bonus is pretty huge. And throughout your grinding, more AP you have generally is more DPS, but that's not always the case, as we know from the monster AP caps. I have a full guide, which I will be linking in the description again. Make sure you go check it out because it is absolutely useful, and because really it could be earning you a lot more money by utilizing these AP caps to your advantage. And lastly, come on over to the gear planner so you can take a look at a few useful calculators. You can put up all your stats and stuff here through your gear and your account build and stuff with your journals and whatnot. And then you can come down to the calculators you have here under the PvE section. So first, obviously, you have the Monster Zone AP caps where it compares it to your stats and gear. And this is useful to understand how the soft cap is affecting you. And you can switch out the weapons and based on that, make your decision on what offhand you're using where. And this is really useful to take into account. Then you have the hit rate calculator, which is super important because you want to make sure with all your accuracy buffs, all your skill buffs and procs and everything, you want to be at 100% hit rate or close to it. It is really important to do that because that really affects your DPS and how much money you're making per hour. So you want to get as close to that as possible, if not to be at 100%. I know when I'm grinding Olins, I have to include a few skills into my rotation and at Hex in order to ensure that I'm not missing or, minimize how much I miss. And that really does affect my money per hour. And when I'm at a grind spot where I don't need it, I'm way over the accuracy cap, I don't use those skills. I can simply trade those over for some more DPS and make more money. So it's definitely important to be aware of what you need and how much accuracy you need in order to grind efficiently at a spot. All right, now it's time to kick off the grind spot recommendations. We are starting off with the early game. So the early game is everything before you have full Pentavala. Obviously, if you're starting out or looking to get into grinding in BDO, you want to start off on seasonal. If you don't have over 245 AP, you definitely want to go into seasonal. And even if you do have higher AP, seasonal is just super important because that's a great source of loot scrolls and stuff. So to kick things off, your goal is going to be go through the main story quest line, progress your way through seasonal, and aim to start off with at least Pry-to-Vala armor, Pry accessories, and Duo to Try weapons. With that being the base, I would recommend you start off with Polyforest. Polyforest is a absolute gem of a grind spot, especially on seasonal, because getting those timeful blackstones is huge. Those are going to fund your gear and they're going to fund loot scrolls, and they just have a great impact overall on your account. Even if the money per hour is a bit low in the beginning, that is a great place to start off. Me personally, at around 180, 190 AP, I always went to Sulfur Mines. You could alternatively go to Pilaku Jail or maybe even Centaurs if you wanted, but in the beginning, the goal is to get to full Pentavala. It's not money. Your progression is through grinding, gathering the material. Me personally, I enjoy grinding in Sulfur Mines. It's such a great grind spot, and it's just a peaceful grind. So it gives me a lot of XP, gets me my character to like 60 pretty easily, and with a little bit more effort, I can get it to 61. But for the most part, these are my recommendations until you get to full Pentavala. Because once you get to full Pentavala, then you can play the rest of the season going for money. In the beginning, it's always important to go for progression to get to that point, and then you can start focusing on making more money, collecting loot scrolls, and saving up for the future. Now let's take a moment to talk about Centaurs. We all heard it. Someone always tells you, hey, I make like $1 bill an hour at Centaurs, let's go, I'm not leaving this place. Understandable. If you're making that much money at any low-level spot, which is low effort and low risk, it is a great spot to stick to. Now, to make such a high amount of money, there needs to be a few factors that we have to put out in the open. Not every class can do it. Certain classes are like hyper grinders at this spot, like for example, Zerker, Awakened Musa, Awakened Valk, and others who are just so good at moving around quickly, one-shotting and going pack to pack, they can really accelerate how much money you make here. So not every class is going to do it. I can't bring a Suck Striker here and try to match up to a Zerker, right? So it is class dependent. Also, you need to make sure you have a really high amount of item drop rate. Some people are grinding here with 300% item drop rate, or even higher if you're grinding on Arsha, using Agris coin. All those things factor into how much money you make at Centaur. So don't get FOMO'd into coming over here and grinding. It is not the only place you need to grind. You can definitely go branch out. It is an option. Me personally, I hate grinding here. I cannot stand it. I can't even get through 1 hour. I don't like these grind spots where I have to cover mass distances, just one-shotting mobs. It's just not fun for me. I enjoy doing my full damage rotation, going from pack to pack, positioning myself, and using all my skills. That's what's fun for me, not this kind of grinding. So do not feel like this is something you have to just camp nonstop, okay? Now that we got that out of the way, let's talk about other grind spots which you don't have to camp at till the bloody end game like centaurs. Let's move on to the assumption that you have full pen to volley gear. Let's say approximately 245 AP or higher. So this is when the fun actually starts. This is where BDO actually kicks in, because everything before this is just easy peasy spots where you're not really doing much more than just one-shotting or two-shotting mobs and running around. Let's start off with the first recommended spot. That is obviously going to be one of my old OG favorites, Star's End. I actually started grinding here all the way back in like 2020 with 245 AP, and we had a lot less damage then than we have now. So if you come here at 245 AP, you could actually go through main rotation, actually do some serious numbers, because now we have artifacts, we have stronger classes, all the OG classes got reboots, and we have a lot better crystals. You put out a lot more damage than you used to. Obviously, getting to like the 269 bracket is when it starts getting efficient, where you're maximizing your AP bracket and really putting out some high numbers. But that's not to say you can't start here on a seasonal character. You can most certainly come here on seasonal, and grinding on seasonal is just so good because you get Timeful Blackstone, Tuvala Aura and stuff, and that really adds to your money per hour. So with 245 AP or full pen Tuvala, you can definitely grind Star's End. Next, I want to go to one of my other OGs. I absolutely love this place. This is Kratuga. Kratuga is a great spot. It's pretty consistent money with some RNG factors with accessories drops and stuff, but that's not too bad. This is an excellent spot to get artifacts. Artifacts are so crucial to your character's build, and there's a wide variety of artifacts that drop in Kratuga. And even till this day, my guildies love spamming Tuga in chat because that is just a great spot. After Kratuga, let's talk a little bit about some other spots. Assuming you're above 245 AP and even a bit more AP, let's say between the range of 245 to 269, I think Thornwood Forest isn't a bad spot at all. My only gripe with Thornwood Forest is they do have some CC going on, which can be annoying, but if you are a class which is can stay pretty protected or keep your distance or have decent like FGs and SAs, you could grind here pretty well. Ominous Rings are at a really nice price point, and if you're still on seasonal server, you also get the added benefit of Timeful Blackstones and stuff. So Thornwood Forest, excellent spot to grind. Another place I want to call out is Murmox. Murmox used to be a sick grind spot back in the day, group spot, the best XP in the game. Now it's not the case anymore, but they did buff it some time back, and it's actually a decent bit of cash now. I did come here and solo it from 60 to 61 when I was getting power leveled in Gyphins on my season character. I came here to finish up my last level, and it went by pretty quick, and the money here isn't bad at all. And the best part is you can do it with some friendos. You can do a 2-man or 3-man and do this pretty efficiently, and definitely something you can keep in mind. Another party grind spot at that AP range is Castle Ruins. Castle Ruins is a bit less popular than other spots. When it first came out, it was pretty popular because of the amount of money we could make as a group, and it was pretty cracked. But they did rebalance Serendia Elvia after some time. It is still a decent spot if you want to hang out with two buddies and, go out, grind, make some money. Not a bad spot at all. And finally in this bracket where we're full pen Tuvala, or let's say 245 AP or higher, you can definitely grind out the infinite potions. Those are things you want to grind out in seasonal if possible, because you get the added benefit of the Timeful Blackstones and you get some additional money through that. Otherwise, it's a really abysmal grind. Like grinding in Shira Ruins is such a painful thing, especially if you're at a higher AP bracket. You're thinking, hey, I could be out there making 500-600 mil an hour. Instead, I'm just barely breaking 150-200 mil an hour here. It's such a bad spot for money. So you want to get these grind spots like the infinite pot grinds done early on. That way you're mitigating how much money you're losing in the future if you came back with more gear. So no recommendation on exactly where you should start, but I would definitely start off with the HP pot and then move to the MP pot at the very least. And you will have to get through these spots anyway. You could, skip out now and wait for the rare treasure event to come through where the alternate spots are activated. That is an option too. Proddy Cave is a good spot for money compared to like the other infinite potion grind spots. So, that is an option, but do keep this in mind. Now the next bracket I want to point out is going to be 269 AP to 280. Now things are getting spicy. You're starting to make a lot more money than you used to. and things are going a lot quicker, especially if you're still at Star's End. I know some of you guys love grinding here. That RNG dopamine spikes are great and all, but you can stick around here for quite a while. But my favorite grind spot in the game is Sakraya Lower. Sakraya is a great spot to grind. It is so consistent. I averaged about 1 Tungrad ring drop an hour usually. It just makes so much good money. You get decent amount of trash loot, you get decent amount of calf res, and it's just such a chill spot. And with frenzy drafts being at a good price, that's an added bonus. So it is just such a good spot. It carries you well above like 280s in the AP until you can like efficiently smash out higher end spots like orcs. You can literally camp here and do nothing else. It is such a good spot. I just absolutely love it. But let's talk a little bit about alternates. So let's say we're still in the 269 to 280 range. What else can you be doing? Well, if you have some Agris to spare and you want to grind with other people, you can definitely come over to Gyphon Upper. Gyphon Upper is a pretty easy spot to grind with that AP, and it pulls out a pretty decent amount of cash. I mean, the trash loot is great when you're grinding here with Agris, so definitely a good option. Then finally, we have another one, which is also a group spot, that is Trincada. This, in terms of money per hour, is certainly not the best. If you're looking for a duo grind spot, it is an option. Me personally, I skipped it out entirely. I just bought my flame. I mean, it depends on the market. Let's check on NA. On NA, looks like the Flame of Despair is sold out, but there doesn't seem to be any pre-orders. So, I'm sure you can just pre-order this. 2 hours of effort in grinding should definitely cover the cost of this versus going over there to grind. But if you want to hang out with a friend and stuff, it's definitely an option to keep in mind. Now let's jump up to the 281 bracket. This is where you start making big money. Now you're in the big leagues, and of course you can still stick to Sakraya. I stuck there for a very long time because I just absolutely love that spot. But to be more efficient with your time, you want to look into higher end grind spots. That is going to be a place like Orcs. Orcs is excellent money, especially if you're on a hyper class, which can blast through really quickly and one-shot grinding when you have the weapon, because ideally most times you're grinding here, half the time you will have a weapon. You also have the option of Bloody Monastery right next door. I personally hated grinding at Bloody Monastery, but you can put on some human damage crystals and blast through there as well. Me personally, whenever I needed shards, I always got the red shards from Orcs, the yellow from Nagas, and the blue from Altar Imps. This isn't a great spot for money, but Altar Imps drop so many blue shards per hour, it is just too hard to pass up. Next, back to the money talk. Let's go to Abandoned Monastery. Abandoned Monastery is an excellent spot to be grinding for cash if you have a friend and you want to do some duo grinding. Absolutely wonderful. I highly recommend doing that if you want to change up the scenery a bit. Then you have Jade Starlight Forest. 281 is a great spot to be starting here at. I personally would recommend starting to grind here as soon as you're in the range of thinking about Labresca. If your region doesn't have any Flame of Frost up for sale, you can definitely grind here. You guys here on NA don't have to worry about that. However, it is an excellent spot to grind at for money because it burns Agris very slowly. It is one of the Agris spots, and honestly, 1 bill an hour was very realistic even back when I was on my striker playing Awaken and being very lazy every day. But it is one of those spots that you can chill grind. It's not too dangerous. It's a set rotation. It's not too much moving around. You get to do your full DPS rotation. It's a great alternative to some other spots out there. Now, a few things we need to talk about. Recently, they did add some buffs to a few grind spots, that being Murwalk's Labyrinth over here in the Mountain of Eternal Winter. I did grind here once. I was out after the knowledge more than anything. It's not a bad grind. It was pretty comfortable. Only thing is, it's a unique grind spot because after a certain amount of rotations, after a certain amount of time, you will have to fight the boss, and fighting the boss guarantees some Embers of Frost or something like that. And that does change things up a bit, so you're not just stuck on autopilot just running around in circles. It does change things up a bit, so it is a bit more interesting because the mobs will spawn in a different pattern. So it's not just a circle you're going through, or it's not just a loop, but rather you're in one room and you're just smashing mobs, where it's a different type of grinding compared to some of the other grind spots. if you want to change up the rhythm and if you're feeling bored, that is definitely something to try out. I don't know about the numbers yet. It's only been updated for a week, so I'm still waiting to get some more concise data. I just wanted to shout it out just because they did recently update it. Then you have the Calpheon Elvia, which also got updated recently. I did grind a Rudums not too long ago. It's not a difficult grind. It was pretty chill. If you wanted some Despairs, that's not a bad option to be grinding at. If you want Crystallized Despair and you're lower AP and DP and you can't efficiently grind Hex or Quint, this is an option. Looks like they did increase the drop rate here, and it's dropping these a lot more than it used to. The trash loot that you're getting was also increased in terms of quantity, so it did improve, and it is an option if you wanted to go for these. But I'm sure a lot of you will just think about the overall money per hour and try to go to the most efficient spots. I guess if that was the case, then Orcs is definitely the place to be. All right, now we are at the end game. This is where the pinnacle of grinding begins, and the most difficult spots, but the most rewarding spots are also present. I didn't know exactly which bracket to start at, so we're just going to roughly say, 290 plus or 293 plus, whatever. But, once you're at the end game, you'll know it. You'll know when you can take on these spots. And of course, we're going to kick things off by talking about Gyfin Underground, because at this point, you'll be thinking about Caphras, and this is a decent place for Caphras. So is Jade Forest and grinding there with Agris, but Gyfin Underground was a solid place. On average, I was getting about like 800 mil an hour. Some hours it was over a bill because I got lucky with drops and stuff, but on average, I think 800 mil an hour was a fair assumption. But as soon as I had enough AP, I went over to Hex. When you're at this point, you're going to have to decide between Quint or Hex, because depending on which class you're playing, it does make a difference, because Quint's more oriented for classes which output high amount of damage in a smaller area, whereas Hex is more suited for classes with bigger AoEs and mobility. For example, I play Suckzerker, Spin to Win. We make short work of high mob density spots and have great mobility for getting around the full rotation. So for me, it was a no-brainer. Hex was a place, but for other classes, Quint's definitely a better option for them. So depending on your class, you can take your choice there. Then we go to Olens. If you want to hang out with two friendos, min-max your rotation, learn all the intricate micro strategies involved and all the tech and all the minute details about a rotation and maximize it to increase your money per hour. This is a great spot, because the difference between just running around in the rotation versus running around and doing all the little strategies is huge. Like, you could go from making 800 mil to a bill per person to over 1.2, 1.3 bill per person. So Olens is one of the pinnacle spots in the game. There are other spots, which I'll talk about now. Olens is the big factor about Olens is obviously you're making good amount of money, you're getting good Caphras, but most importantly, you get the merchant ring piece. So when you're at the late game, you'll really want to start thinking about grinding for the merchant ring. My philosophy is if I don't have the Olens piece, nothing else matters. Going and getting the other pieces don't really matter, because if I don't get over this biggest hurdle that is, group grinding at Olens and getting that, getting the other pieces just really didn't matter to me. So I'd also recommend others to do the same thing. Get Olens out of the way first. That's a great place to start, and that is one of the more difficult places to grind and get the piece for. Then you have Crypt. Crypt is not a great place to be grinding for money and stuff, I guess, but if you're grinding for the merchant ring, you can solo, but a strategy that people employ is grinding with a Shy and duo grinding it. Overall, it is not a very difficult piece to get in terms of hours compared to Olens. Then you have Ash Forest, easy peasy solo grind. It just, takes a matter of hours and just knocking on a loot pinata till you get that piece. Then you have Paddocks. I've got mixed reviews about that spot, but I'm sure by the time you're at this, you're pretty sick of grinding there and you just want it to be done. And finally, you have Sakraya. Grinding Sakraya lore for that merchant ring piece is a meme. Go to the upper. That definitely has a much better chance of getting you your piece. They did recently increase the money per hour. It's nowhere comparable to, mid-game or end-game grind spots. Upper is just going to be a meme grind. You're just going to be one-shot grinding those mobs until you finally get the piece. But hey, that's what you do at the end game. When you're going for the merchant ring piece, you put an enormous amount of time, and of course you'll feel like it's a loss. But once you do get the ring, you can make a lot of money. All right, let's talk about Agris grinding now. I'm not going to go over every single spot. Obviously, there's going to be plenty more than what I state. But here's what I did and what I prefer to do. So until I could reach Jade Starlight Forest, I grinded Centaurs. Centaurs with Agris is an excellent way to maximize your Agris points. And then once you're at 281 plus and you can grind Jade Forest pretty well, that's a decent place to be at, because back then we couldn't buy the Flame of Frost on the marketplace, so we had to grind it out ourselves. So I came here as soon as possible. But even after I got the Flame, I was able to make over $1 bill an hour grinding here with Agris. So solid spot all around. And an alternative for grinding here at Jade Starlight Forest is grinding with a group at Gyfin Uppers. It's a lot more chill. It's just running around and just slapping those mobs. Whereas Jade Starlight Forest, you're really trying to push yourself to kill faster and faster and try to make as much as possible. I always fall Gyfin Upper with 5-man. It was a lot more chill. Then lastly, if you want another group spot, or the best spot I should say, is Olin's. Olin's is an excellent place to be using your Agris. Definitely a place that you want to be spending your Agris points, because you make so much money there. It is an excellent grind spot overall. Once you have an efficient group, a group that knows all the mechanics, knows what they're doing, you can make some solid cash there and get some decent amount of Caphras. Of course, there are other spots in the game, but those are my key ones. And that pretty much actually, even though it's a really short list, it covered you from early game. Early game being Centaurs, and mid and late game being Jade Starlight Forest, Gyfin Upper for party, and finally Olin's. That's all there is to it. But honestly, you don't have to feel like you have to go and spend an hour over there in order to be efficiently using your Agris, because let's say you're not able to spend that hour over there. Just use it at whatever grind spot you're at. Just don't be sitting at 100k Agris by the time you log off, because then you're just wasting money. You could have gotten free money by grinding wherever you normally grind and just popping the Agris anyway and spending 20k, versus being at 100k and going over cap and losing out on 20k Agris. So even if you're not going to go to the Agris spots and grind there for an hour at full efficient mode, and you're grinding somewhere else, like I'm at Hex or Gyfin Underground, I'll just click on Agris and spend the 20k at any other spot while I'm already there, so I don't have to make the trip again, because I know I'm not going to grind for another hour during the day. Now we're at the final section. Let's talk about what you do if you don't have any loot scrolls. Obviously, loot scrolls are the lifeline of grinding. If you're not grinding with a loot scroll, you're wasting your time, buddy. So there are alternatives though. Let's say you want to make money, but you don't have loot scrolls. You do have a value pack. You can do a meme little activity called doing scrolls. The scrolls of ancient language. These are the peel of face scrolls. These cost what? 2.19 here on NA, but memory fragments sell for a lot more. Back in the day in 2020, when I first started out this game, even if there was a small margin, I used to do it back in the day and make bank. And that was like back in 2020, right? So it was great money to do it even then. Now the margins are even higher. So actually running these scrolls are a great way to make cash, even if you don't have any loose scrolls. As long as you have the value pack and you have some money to buy the scrolls to begin with, you don't have to go farm this yourself. And if you do farm your own scrolls, make sure you're going and doing the scroll itself and getting those memory fragments to sell. Never sell these straight up. So doing this activity is a great way to make money, and you can do it with a party, you can do it with friends, and you guys can all go put in 5 summons each, and it's a fun activity, I'd say. It's definitely a break from grinding, and it gives you a decent amount of cash for pretty low effort. I started doing this at 160 AP, and I was able to solo it really well. So it is a very low level activity, and it can net you a lot of money. Then you have the option of actually going and getting more loot scrolls. So if you are on a seasonal character, go and grind. Go grind for timeful blackstones like at Poly Forest or something, and turn those in for loot scrolls. I think the exchange rate is what, 300 timeful for 1 loot scroll, I believe, something like that. I know there are guides out there, so look them up on YouTube. And yeah, you can actually stock up on loot scrolls like that. Me personally, I'd never graduate a seasonal character early if I'm in need of loot scrolls. I would just sit there and farm loot scrolls until season's over and have enough that you'll never run out again. Especially if you're a new player and grinding is going to be something you're going to be doing for a long time. The game just gives you loot scrolls. Like as a life skiller, I saved up near 1,000 loot scrolls. So even earlier this year when I was grinding every day, I never ran out of loot scrolls. I slapped the yellow loot scroll every hour I grinded, but still, for whatever reason, the game just kept giving me loot scrolls and I never ran out. So it's not hard to, as a casual player, to maintain a solid supply. Me, I'm a casual player, but I know some people grind 4, 5, 6 hours a day. For them, they do run out. I understand that. So, you know, by using a seasonal character, that is a good option to resupply and stock up on loot scrolls, so you're able to grind in the better spots in the future. And definitely do dungeons. I know it's not a grind spot related thing, but I just gotta stress it, guys. If you're at the gear score to be doing LV dungeons, do it. Make sure you get your guildies involved, get your friends involved, and do it every week. I believe you can do it once on your main and then once more on your alt per week to get rewards. And that's what endgame players do. And it is so much money. It's like an hour of grinding without spending a loot scroll, without spending an hour. An experienced group can do all the dungeons within 30 minutes, super quick, skipping mechanics and stuff because they do so much damage. And that's at a bare minimum. I actually made over 5 bill from one dungeon run a few months ago when I was more active and doing it every week, and it was actually insane. Every week I was getting at least, 1.5 to 2 bill from it. But, sometimes you get RNG carried, and it is 100% worth doing your dungeons. Even if you get shafted by RNG and you don't get anything good, it's still almost more money than grinding at Hex for me. So I can't stress enough, do the dungeons, get your friends involved, get your guildies, and it's hard to start off, but once you're in it and once you're comfortable doing it, it's something you'll do every week. All right, now I am out of breath, but luckily the video is done. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you found it helpful. Please do like, comment, and subscribe if you did. And check out my guide to AP caps. I hope you find that helpful as well. It definitely opened my eyes to grinding in this game. I always thought, no, I needed a pen black star, but then I realized I was grinding orcs with way too much AP and it really didn't matter. So, it was definitely insightful figuring out that stuff. Anyway, take it easy, guys. I will catch you guys next time. Peace.